Hi, this is Mark from ITCU Solutions, and today I just want to go over how to set up site-to-site VPNs using the Fortinet platform. And in our example today, we're going to use two Fortinet firewalls and then also a Cisco router in the mix. And what we're going to do is we're just going to set up a site-to-site tunnel between headquarters and a remote VPN in our example in Boston, and then also another site-to-site tunnel between our headquarters, Fortinet VPN, and our Cisco router in Chicago. And to do this on the Fortinet, we're going to go over 4 steps. The first is we're just going to create the address groups. So we basically add a name to the subnets in both Boston, Chicago, and headquarters. And then we're going to create what's called a custom tunnel on the Fortinets. And in that case, it just means we're going to manually set up the tunnel. If you set up a site-to-site or something else, it's basically the wizard doing it for you. And then the third step we're going to do is we're going to create the firewall policy to control the traffic between the headquarters and the 2 remote sites, Boston and Chicago. And then finally, we're going to add static routes so all the VPNs know how to route traffic to and from between each other. So let's get started. So we're going to jump on the HQ Fortinet right at the very beginning here. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up those address groups. So we're just going to go to Policy and Objects, create those address group objects. So we'll do the first one, we'll just call HQ. And the HQ subnet was 10.220/24, and all these are going to be Class Cs. So we'll create the next one, we'll call it Boston. Which is just the 222 network. And then finally we'll add Chicago. Which will be the 333 network. Okay. Now once we got the addresses set up, that's our first step. And the next step then is to create those VPN tunnels. So again, we're going to do a custom because we want to do this manually. And so the first one, we're just going to call to Boston. And this is another Fortinet device. So we got to get our peer address first. So to Boston is 4452 is the peer address, the outside address of our remote VPN. And of course, that's going to be on our WAN interface since it's the outside interface of the device we're connecting to. And then for our pre-shared key, we're just going to make it something simple. We'll just use the word password. Make sure we spelled that right. And I'm not going to change proposals. The template or the defaults for the Fortinet VPNs are fairly decent, fairly secure. So we're going to leave those as is. And then also here we have to set up our crypto map for our phase 2 connectors here. So we're just going, since we set up named addresses, we're going to use those to make it easier. So we have HQ and we have Boston for our crypto map. And then also I'm going to leave these policies the same as well. Now these don't actually have to match exactly on the other side because it will negotiate those. It just has to be this policy, the policy that's on the remote just has to be included in the ones that we have listed here. And the other thing is when you do set up policies, when you look at these, the lifetime in phase 1 technically is recommended to be longer than your lifetime in phase 2, and you can see Fortinet does that. So I think we're pretty good to go using these defaults. So we'll create that. Okay, now I'm going to create one to my Cisco device, and also if you're connecting to a Cisco device, it's also probably not a good idea to use a wizard, and let me show you why. Because if you look at the site-to-site Cisco template that the wizard will use, you will notice right off the bat the proposal uses very weak encryption. It's still using DES and MD5, and it's doing it for both phase 1 and phase 2. So if you do set up a tunnel to a Cisco device with the wizard, you're going to have to go back in and edit, convert it to a custom tunnel anyways and go back and edit it. And I don't think it's worth your time doing that. It's probably just a lot easier to create a custom tunnel. So we're just going to say to Chicago. Okay. And again, we need the peer address, which in this case should be 4472. See it there on the outside interface of the Cisco router. Which of course again is our outside interface on the device we're configuring, and again we'll use password. Okay, the only thing I'm going to change here is I know my Cisco router doesn't support Diffie-Hellman 14, so I know it's going to be, it is using one of these. I believe it's using AS128 SHA-256, so this should work fine for it, the way it's currently set up. And then we have to set up that crypto map to Chicago again, so we'll use named addresses, and again it will be headquarters. This time we're going to go to Chicago, and I'll do the same thing under advanced. Get rid of that Diffie-Hellman group. We'll click OK. Okay, so we have our two tunnels created. The next step is to create our firewall policies. And you can see we need to have a policy for both interfaces for the traffic to go between those. And actually, since the policy is going to be the same, and this is probably going to be true for most of the time when you set up VPNs, I'm going to actually go in and set up a zone so I don't have to set up 4 different policies. I can get away with 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a zone to aggregate my 2 VPN interfaces, and I'm just going to call them to the zone, well, let's call it remote sites. And we're just going to add these 2 VPN interfaces for my members. And I can get away with this as long as the policy I'm using to both sites is the same. Okay, so we have our zone down there with both interfaces that are aggregated together. So now we'll go back and create our firewall policy. So we need to create a policy 2, and I'm going to call it 2 remote sites because I named my zones that. You might have wanted to do something like 2 Boston or 2 Chicago if you needed different firewall policies. So we're going to start with internal, and the outgoing interface is going to be my zone now, remote sites. And then source is going to be HQ. And you know what? I'm going to create another address group here. We'll call this remote sites. And we'll add both Boston and Chicago to it. Okay. Now, because this is a VPN tunnel, we don't want to translate the NAT, at least not in this case. We're not going to NAT the traffic. So we'll turn that off as well. And we're going to allow everything. So it's a very basic policy. This is part of the reason I'm aggregating my sites. And then we just have to do the same thing in reverse. So we can do from remote sites. This time we're going to do remote sites, incoming interface, and it's going to go out to internal. And this time the source will be remote sites. The destination will be headquarters. And the service will be all. And we'll turn off NAT. Okay. Now, for example, in this example, I'm assuming that these sites aren't going to have any internet access, because if they did need internet access, not only would I have to, when I originally set up my tunnel, my crypto map would have had to be, if I was going out to the remote sites, from 0.0.0.0/0, because I have to include all the public addresses of the internet, and then vice versa. I would also have to add another policy here, going from my remote sites out to WAN 1, so that there's a policy for the things coming in for those VPN tunnels to go out to the internet. I'm not going to cover that here, but that's what you'd have to do to make that work if you want to share your WAN when you connect back to your remote sites. Okay, so we have that. So the last thing we have to do is just add our static routes. So we'll create a static route to Boston. And that interface, of course, is going to be the Boston VPN interface. Okay. This isn't absolutely necessary, but for security reasons, you may want to create a null route as well. So if your tunnel is down, it just gets routed straight to the black hole. Probably won't matter, but if you do this, make sure your administrative distance is set higher than 10, which is your standard route administrative distances. Okay, so this route up here will function as long as the tunnel's up, but once this interface goes down, everything will just get black holed. That's the point of doing that. So we'll add another route to Chicago. And we'll create the black hole route as well. There's black hole. But again, make sure you add a very high admin distance, or at least higher than 10. Okay, so if we go back to that, we've completed all of our steps here. So we're ready to move on to the remote VPN. And this is our VPN at Boston. Okay, in this case, I'm just going to use the wizard to show you how it works and to show you why I don't like it, but it does work. So I'm just going to create a site called 2HQ, and we're going to use, it's going to a FortiGate, and we're not going to use NAT, so it's all good there for the wizard. We have to look up our peer address, which should be 4.4.4.2 to the HQ Fortinet. And obviously it goes out our WAN 1, and we're going to use that same password shared, pre-shared key, so we're good there. And our local interface is going to be internal. And then of course the remote, since we're not looking for internet access, is just going to be 10.2.2.0.24. Now if you're using the wizard and you wanted to share the WAN at the other location, of course you would just check the forced use remote WAN. What that's going to do is it's going to change the remote subnet to 0.0.0.0/0, so it includes all those external public IPs from the internet. Okay, so we're going to continue. Now, you can go in here and change the group name, but it already creates other address groups here. We won't worry about it. We'll just do it as is because I don't want to wait. So we're just going to show the tunnel list. And you can see this generated 4 references. The other one, I would have only had 3 because I used the zone. But the reason this has 4 references, it will have the reference to the IPsec tunnel itself. It will have, it had to create 2 policies. So those interfaces, which I hate the way the wizard names stuff, but that's what it's doing. If you look at this, this is your interface, right? That's going to be referenced. Okay. So your HQ interface right here for your tunnel is there. So that's two of your references, and then the last reference, of course, will be the static route it created. And you can see that it black holed one of them as well, and then it created one to the okay, it's using the 2HQ remote. So again, I don't like the way it's kind of confusing the way it names things. This is part of the reason I don't like using the wizard. But it should have worked fine in this case. So we'll go back here and we'll see if our tunnel comes up. So let's select the tunnel. And see if it comes up here. Maybe I'll pause the video while I'm waiting. Okay, you can see that the tunnel did come up. And if I try to ping across it, you can see that it's working fine. So let's move on to our, I'm just going to log into our Cisco router. I pre-configured the Cisco router since this video isn't about how you set up a Cisco router for a tunnel like this. But we're going to log in and see if it came up as well. Oops, that's wrong. P, sorry. Chicago. Okay. Okay, it shows it's active, so if we go back to the primary HQ Fortinet, we should see both tunnels are up and running. And it doesn't show Chicago being up, but it is. We'll bring it up. As you can see. So that shows you how to set site-to-site tunnels up using the Fortinet platform. As you can see, it's very easy. It's very quick. I would say it's quite a bit simpler than Cisco. It works fine with Cisco devices. Although I will warn you, if you're using ASAs, you might want to consider using iKey version 2. I've always been able to get it to work with version 1, but it has been a lot more problematic, partly just with the policy sets. So I hope this video was helpful, and if anyone has any questions, please put it in the comments below. Thank you.